Coming to you live. The baddest radio TV talk show around.
My better. We got everything politics on the street. We got everything media TV. We got everything politics on the street. My better. Follow my better. Introducing your host and co-host,
Kevin Nicosia.
Hey, it's June the 9th, 2020, coming to you live from our home studio. You're listening to My Better Half. And you can check us out on
Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
I'm your host, Kevin.
And I'm your girl, Garcia.
And we have a great show tonight. On this day, George Floyd was laid to rest. And his murder in the killing of Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery has caused hundreds and thousands of people to take to the streets in protest of racism and injustice in America. And there are a lot of emotions, and everyone's talking about their personal experience of racism in different lanes. And so you would think that after 1619, that the problem of race would have ended. And everyone's talking about, but someone keeps passing the baton. And because it's not a race, it's racism. And the baton never stops being passed. So unless someone blows the whistle and says illegal start, or the race comes to an end, it'll keep running its course. So even though we pass a law, that law will only restrain abuse. It won't change the heart. And so racism, I believe, is a disease of the heart, the mind. And so what I did is we found two gentlemen that we brought together to speak honestly about race. And one is a longtime friend of mine, and the other one is someone I've learned to love in recent days, especially about his work to heal souls of this racial divide. So we want to welcome to our show Dr. Jerry Taylor and Douglas Foster, professor of church history at Abilene Christian College. And we want to welcome them to our show. How y'all doing?
Doing well.
All right.
Good to be with you.
You know, this is an uncomfortable topic. They're talking about it all over the United States right now. It's been talked about, but seldom there were solutions that came about. It's like we put a Band-Aid on it and we went on our way, but the scar is still there. So I want to have a little background, tell our viewing audience who we have on the show. So Jerry, tell me a little bit, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I was born in a little town about 36 miles north of Memphis called Covington, Tennessee. I was raised in Millington, which is about 8 miles north of Memphis. I was 7 years old when Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis. And so I was exposed to the horrors of racial hatred and white supremacy at a very young age. And I grew up in a part of the country in West Tennessee that had a very serious, acute problem with racism. And I would soon learn that it was not just a problem in West Tennessee, but it was and still is an American problem. And so as a kid, walking the rural roads of Tennessee, because we at the time had no car for transportation, and as a kid, 5 or 6 years old, white people would drive by in their vehicles and scream the word nigger at us, and some would throw bottles at us because back then they sold Coca-Cola in bottles. Those out of the car at us, and sometimes they would even aim their vehicles at us, and we would have to jump off the road to keep from being hit. So I learned early as a child that I was a part of a people that had a particular designation in terms of the value of my skin that attracted a very venomous hatred to it. And so that experience, which is related to the belief that there were white people that could not stomach the existence of black people, would become confirmed as I grew older. And so that's the kind of background out of which I've come, and a little bit about my history.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the psychological effect that had, because I think that's one thing that's really overlooked, especially when you experience that as a child. And so now, Doug, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Before you get started, I want to say how I really appreciate you being on the show. A lot of times, we don't necessarily have dialogue like this, especially on our commercial channels. And I mean, honest dialogue. I looked at you all's YouTube channel, and that's what really made me want to have you all on the show, because the way you interacted and how honest you were about what you experienced in your lives. Jerry went first, and he was honest about, and you're able to use that kind of language and dialogue together without flinching. And that's what makes it uncomfortable a lot of times, because when you have a dialogue like this here, people start flinching. Am I politically correct if I say this to you? And but when you come honestly, then we just say exactly what happened, because you know what happened, and Jerry know what happened. So why sit together and lie to one another? So I just want to thank you for doing the show.
Well, I thank you for doing it. I think these are conversations that have to be had among Christians, especially because we share something so deeply significant. I was born in Northwest Alabama in 1952. So right at the time when things began to happen in what many would call the Civil Rights Movement, that I lived in was about 25% Black. But I had no meaningful relationships with any Black person. I saw people. I was a paper carrier, and part of the route that I carried was in a Black neighborhood, but I had no meaningful relationships with anyone. But growing up as a white person in the South, I, like every person in this country, really, North, South, or wherever, received the kind of socialization that the system of white supremacy was designed to give everyone. And so nobody used that terminology. Nobody said that this is what they were doing, but this is just part of the air we breathe. For example, I'm a little child, and there was a store very close to our house, 3 or 4 blocks away. And I would go down there, and the lady that ran the store, she and her husband, older couple, I would buy candy, and we would talk, and they were just such nice people. But then the man was gone one time, and I asked about him, and the lady said that he was in the hospital. But they had recently, in my town, integrated the hospital. Now, I'm a little kid. This lady's been nice to me. She likes me, apparently, obviously a white lady. But she says, I would as soon see him, her husband, die than be in a room with a Black person, except she didn't use that term.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kinds of things that I'm getting. These are the kinds of things that I am being into.
Molded.
Exactly. It's sort of like programming a computer. It's the way that things work.
And that's one thing that, I think the question is, with black people is why. We've never dialogued to say, why do you feel like that? When did that start? So Jerry talks about being at home and then people passing by throwing bottles at him and calling him the N-word. So the first time you hear it, let me get to Jerry for a couple minutes. I'm going to come back to you. Jerry, the first time you hear that word in its purity, what did that do as a child? Did you go back inside and ask mom what was that word? Was it ever explained to you as a child?
It was never explained in full detail as a child until I actually experienced the pain of it in the context of a friendship in the second grade. When I was in the second grade at Covington, had made friends with this white kid named Michael, and we would normally play together on the playground. And one day, my friend said to me, "I can't play with you anymore." And I was shocked. I was like, "Well, what did I do? What's wrong?" He said, "My daddy told me I can't play with you anymore because you are a nigger." And that word cut through my spirit like a trillion knives. To have someone whom I had trusted even as a kid, as a friend, that would reject me because his father told him that I was like some type of virus or some type of disease, that he was not safe to be around. And so that etched an emotional message in the DNA of my spirit that I carried with me, for many, many years. And that scar is still there. I've learned how to manage it better, but that was my first experience of the word nigger being used to hit me in the face of my soul and the stomach of my spirit.
And if you would ask most black folks, they can remember the Challenger exploding. They can remember where they were at 9/11. I can remember the first time I heard somebody call me that.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you exactly where I was as a child.
Yeah.
It's not that you hadn't heard it before.
Yeah.
But I had never heard it voiced to me, looking eye to eye with someone.
Yeah.
And people don't know how traumatic that is for a child.
Yeah. And the people in the vehicles, I had no relationship with them.
Right.
They were complete strangers, but someone who supposedly was a friend, someone that I had experienced some connectivity to, that I had lowered my guards with, then to say, "I reject you, I withdraw my fellowship, I withdraw my friendship from you because you are the N-word." That added extra pain to it. Strangers can do some things to you and not hurt so bad, but when people do the same thing that supposedly are your friends, it can be a devastating emotional experience.
Okay. Doug.
Yes.
I want to get back to Doug. For the audience, because like I said, there are a lot of questions with the word "why" in front of it. So, in your neighborhood or in your house, did you know anybody that was born racist?
Hmm. Well, Kevin, that's a kind of it's a question that becomes, for me, because I've studied the history so much. Let me just preface what I'm going to say next.
Okay.
By saying, Kevin, you and Jerry have both expressed something that makes this much more spiritually significant than anything I might say about the history of racism and how people became white supremacist racists, and the history's there. There's plenty of data, there's plenty of information, books have been written about it, and we can talk about those kinds of things later on. But what you two just described about being spiritually wounded at a deep level, we can talk about the history and the theory and all the things, and all of those are important, and we've got to get that on the table. But the most destructive piece of this all is how it devastates human beings, created in the image of God. And your question, I think, is getting at the point that when we're born, we don't already have a racist mentality. There's not already in place a set of racist assumptions. But the fact of the matter is, the way our system is set up in this country, and racism is not confined to this nation, but we have a specific, unique, historical context that has created racism in a certain kind of way, that expresses itself in a certain kind of way. And that's what we have to deal with here, because we're here. And I think that what happens with everybody in this country, and I was remembering something that Robin DiAngelo wrote a book. She's a white woman, has worked for decades in, I guess you could say, diversity training. I'm not sure I like that terminology so well, but she wrote a book called White Fragility. And one of the things that she says, and documents it quite well, I'll just read a short paragraph. Most of us would not choose to be socialized into racism and white supremacy. Unfortunately, we don't have that choice. While there's variation in how these messages are conveyed and how much we internalize them, nothing could have exempted us from these messages. Like the messages I was getting as a kid with the lady at the store. Hearing my grandmother talk about taking a bus trip, my grandmother, who I love, taking a bus trip from North Alabama to Nashville and having to be in the same room with black people, and just acting like that this was such a distasteful thing to her. These are the kind of things that are just constantly being said. And, maybe it's not necessarily as overt today, but I'll tell you, it is in 1,000 ways every day, whether you are black or white or brown, whatever, we're receiving those messages, sometimes subliminally, subtly. And so we have to deal with it. We have to realize it and deal with it.
Since we're talking about this, the honest part is sometimes things are behind closed doors. What people are generally talking about now is they have to tell their sons how to behave when they come in front of an officer. Well, back then, our parents had to tell us how to behave going out in front of white people. Not just the police, but I'm talking about a conduct. No eye to eye, go do what you got to do, get out of there quick, because they wanted you back home. So this back home stuff, safety, is not new. They're talking about the police today. We were talking about society when you cross the track. And that's the discussions that we had in the house. Before we could go out, we were already taught how to behave ourselves, because we knew the consequences of going out. It wasn't a thing about going out, being scared that we're losing our humanity. But the thing about misbehaving, we had a cloud of witnesses. We had Tulsa, we had Rosewood, because one spark meant massacre. It would mean massacre of a black community, one spark. And so nobody wanted to do that tripwire. So we were just saying, leave that alone. Injustice, leave that alone. And we would just come along and accept it. And that put a divide in the black community of people who didn't want to take it anymore and those who said, y'all gonna make trouble.
Mm.
That's what divided us. Our argument was always white people in the middle of it, even our education. Because I know Jerry suffered it because he's highly educated. I know some of his brethren start saying you're trying to be white. So we went off and tried to do good in proper English. We even caught it from our side. Our argument was always you trying to be white.
Mm.
And Jerry knows that, don't you, Jerry?
Yes, I do. And I had to come to grips with the fact that as a black child, all the way up to my college education, uh, I was trained versus educated in a way, not to try to be white, but to actually be white. And so the very black brothers and sisters that would put a label on another black person just because they work inside of a white system do not understand they are white because the white is inside of them. Just because you have black skin does not mean the system of oppression and the system of white supremacy has not been embedded in you. And so all of us are conditioned.
All right, Jerry, we're losing your single. What we're gonna do is take a break, and I'll give producers time to kind of get that stronger. So we're gonna take a break. We'll be back in a minute. Okay.
Ooh, ice cold. Freeze pop.
Are you looking to lose weight, detox your body, build your immune system, and boost your metabolism? Or do you lack energy throughout the day? Maybe you need more focus and mental clarity. Or maybe you're just looking to find ways to combat against health issues such as anxiety, headaches, muscle and nerve pain? Well, TLC is the place to be. And if none of those pertain to you, I'm here to tell you that everyone should be detoxing, no matter who you are.
Okay, we're back. Sorry for that technical difficulty. I hope we got it fixed. We're gonna go back to Jerry, and we were talking about a few minutes ago. I didn't want him to lose this thought. He was talking about hurrying up, trying to be white.
Okay. Yeah, people who condemn other blacks being white or wanting to be white because they work inside of white systems must realize that all white people and all black people, all brown people that have experienced any time in educational institutions that have been under the control of white people and white supremacy, we have all been taught to be white. Our souls have been whitewashed. And so just because you don't work in a white system does not mean that the white system has not infiltrated the very ground of your being. And so with people trying to attack the system, the external system, to get rid of the external system, you have to first confront the presence and the existence of the system of white supremacy that exists in you and that got into your system just by you breathing the air that you breathe growing up in this country and being educated at the hands of white teachers and in society at large. So the whiteness is in everybody. And the task that we have is to evolve from a distorted, a distortion of our own spiritual nature, the destruction to our spirit that has happened as a result of us being whitenized. God did not call us to be white. He called us to be spiritual. He called us to be liberated and to be free. And the only way that you can become free is you must know the truth, not fabricated truth, not distorted truth, but the truth, and the truth will set you free. So I would encourage people that would say that to be aware that you can be inside of a quote unquote black system or a black institution or a black organization and be as white as the driven snow. It's called internalized oppression. It's called taking into your being an external spirit that was designed to get inside of you and to replace the authentic you and to control, to push the control buttons of your being from the control center that exists within you. And you won't be in control of yourself. God won't be in control of you until through the truth, you're able to evict that foreign spirit that is in control of your inner life.
You know, and this question is for both of you. Is it still in today the color of the skin, or is it the state of mind? Is racism the color of the skin, or is it the state of mind?
Since
Doug.
I gave that long,
Yeah, I want to ask Doug.
Go ahead.
Well, it is a mindset. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of constructing reality. It is a way of creating sort of a hierarchy, if you want to use that term. What's better, what's worse, that has been so systematized for so long that it's assumed. But the attachment of inferiority to darker skinned people and superiority to white or light skinned people is something that has been a historical creation for a long, long, long time. Again, we have a specific context in this country. We have specific things that have happened. Even the system of slavery that became so evil and oppressive and so pervasive in this country was created, the rationale for it was created a couple of hundred years early. Even longer than that, really, because when you start looking at the history of how these ideas became put into place that made darker skinned people inferior, the reason it was done initially was for a justification to enslave people. Some of your listeners may have read or heard about this really brilliant book by Ibram Kendi. It's entitled "Stamped from the Beginning." I'm not sure this will be able to be seen well, but the subtitle, "The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America." And he goes through from the earliest days of how these ideas, again, in this context and the way it came into America, were created. And it was basically to justify, that is, that the inferiority of darker skinned people justified their being enslaved. But the enslavement was for the economic benefit of those who were enslaving those people. For their labor and benefit from that economically and by extension politically and nationally. And so value is attached. You know, racism in and of itself is not about black skin or white skin or brown skin. It's about the value you attach to that.
Right.
Long history of the creation of white supremacist racism, it's for reasons of economic benefit ultimately, and for position, power. It has been assigned to darker skinned people.
Right. And you know, in the 60s, right around I guess the late 60s, we had to detox ourselves. We had to put out records that said I'm black and I'm proud. We were really speaking to ourselves, because over the years of, you know, injustice and racism, George Floyd looks like the stereotype black person that they made fun of. Big nose, big lips. That's, you know, we were given parts of our bodies to be ashamed of. And a lot of times we try to manipulate things. You know, we even got to the point where we didn't want to have dark children. That's how bad it was on us. Then we start fighting light skin, dark skin, even among us. That's why I say whites were always in the middle of our argument of advancement, because we had been polluted with that. And then when we would speak out to that, what I call, you know, desensitized, that means that, and not all white people, not all our white brothers, they didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to see it, they didn't want to speak it, they didn't want to feel it, and they didn't want to smell it. So they became desensitized. Not my problem. I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that. And so a lot of times, you know, sometimes you just wake up. I remember looking at, I think maybe the closest movie, one of the closest movies that resembled what happened in slavery was 12 Years a Slave. But it would show up at the Academy Awards and people would say, that was good. And one day I blinked and I said, what was good about that? It won an award for what? To entertain people on how bad it was for us. That's what I mean, desensitized. And we were too. That was the transmittable disease of racism that even got into us. And people thought it didn't exist because in a lot of places we just conform to it, and we conform to it because we exchange economic privilege for it. But we start marching for economic privileges, to sit in the restroom, or to have the privilege to relieve ourselves. But see, there's a difference in this march than the marches in the 60s. When they get through marching, they can go in Dairy Queen. They can go in Whataburger. When they got through marching in the 60s, they went home and got some alcohol for the rocks that was hitting them across the head. And there was necessarily no rioting, because they can go. The shoulders of the road were staged by, you know, whites throwing stuff. So they stayed the path. And the police was at the end. And then they did kneel down, they went home, or they got beat. So it's totally different now. They're fighting for civil rights. We were fighting for human rights. We were fighting to say we wasn't even human. See, I'm 62. So I know. We were fighting to prove we were human. You can't use this toilet. You use that toilet. You can't drink this fountain. You drink that fountain. You can't go to this school. You go to that school. So it was humanity. And so a lot of times this generation, what they don't understand is they're arguing over the flag right now, And in their minds, they said, why do I want to pledge allegiance to a flag that didn't pledge allegiance to me? And that's what it's about. But if you desensitize, you can't hear it, you can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't feel it, you can't smell it. So that's why in this show, I am so grateful that you two can have that dialogue so that it gives an example of people when they want to talk, screaming in the camera, nobody hearing you.
Mm.
You got to sit down and talk because there's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors that I'll never know unless you tell me. Because I want to know why. I can't go back into the past and do, but I really want to know why.
Mm.
So so in your neighborhood, how long did it take for Doug for you to know that there was a difference?
Mm. I like I said, had no meaningful relationships with any persons of color in growing up. No black people, even though 25% of this area that I lived in was black. The population was black, but I had no meaningful relationships. And the fact that there were separate places to go to the bathroom, to eat, to live, neighborhoods that were different. It sort of reminds me of the very first film in the Eyes on the Prize series, the first one that was done in 1987. At one point in that first episode, they interviewed a black man and a white woman. I think it was in Birmingham, if I'm not mistaken. And Ramsey Moore is a black man, and they interviewed him about this whole setup. And he said, I just thought this was the way it was supposed to be. I just thought that's the way God made things, and that's the way it was supposed to be. And then they interviewed the woman, the white woman, Virginia Durr. She said the same thing. Everything just basically was the way it was, and nobody said it was wrong or unusual or something that shouldn't be. It was just the way it was. And so apparently this was the way God set things up, and this is the way it was supposed to be. And I think that socialization that those two expressed in that Eyes on the Prize film was the same kind of socialization that I received. It was just, this was just the way it was supposed to be. Now, I knew, it became more and more obvious over time. I knew that those, in many cases in the black community, had less access. Their school was not in good repair. In many cases, they didn't have as nice a home as the people, at least that I lived around. And they didn't have cars or didn't have nice cars. And so, it was something that was obvious at some point that there were differences, but it didn't seem like it was wrong or out of the ordinary. That was just the socialization that I received. And it took me, I'll tell you, I'll have to say, I wrote an article about some of my experiences earlier this year. And I just had to say, I had no meaningful relationship with any black person. I'm 67 until I was in my 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Jerry at ACU who was one of the first people who made a real difference in connection and would speak with integrity and truth, even in the midst of what I can understand. I can't really fully understand. I'll never really fully understand, but even in situations where I think I would have gotten angry. I would have been lashing out, but he always spoke in kindness and in Christian love.
Mm-hmm.
And, because of that patient tutoring, I guess you would say, over time, things began to be more plain. Things began to be more apparent that this was not right, that this was evil, that this was contrary to the nature of God. This was contrary to the heart of Christ. It was contrary to the gospel itself in such deep and significant ways. And so I'll have to say, growing up in North Alabama, I did not get it. I didn't get it until into my fourth decade. And thank God I did have people like Jerry Taylor and others who became so significant in my spiritual life, in my spiritual development, to help me understand and then begin to grapple with at some basic level. Again, I don't think any white person in this country will ever fully understand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how far along the walk you are. Every white person will be on that walk for his or her whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And, but to be able to have those meaningful relationships, and it's more than just relationships, but the relationships are very, very important. And I thank God for that. God's worked in those ways.
You know, sometimes, you know, in our road as Christians, we wind up in places that we never thought we were going to be.
Mm.
I know after taking shots from Coke bottles in Tennessee, Jerry would have never thought he'd have been in Abilene. He never thought that. And that's what happened. See, I know Jerry for a while. This one time, sometimes God gives you somebody in front of you to watch. It was really two men that I watched transition, and that was my coach that I talked about, you know, in college. You know, I had a white coach in college that really helped me transition, and I remember seeing Jerry transitioning. First time I saw Jerry, he was in overalls, straight out of Tennessee. preached the gospel sermon, came down to our congregation back in the 70s in overalls.
I still got him.
I know it. But I saw him develop. Now the thing that, you know, I'll tell Jerry in two worlds. Now you just told me about Jerry in the world he's in now. And that's the way God does sometimes. God will put you in Egypt and put you in Canaan.
Mm.
So Jerry is an outstanding preacher. And I mean, he can speak to both worlds. He's an outstanding, not only that, he's a phenomenal singer. I've seen Jerry sing and wreck the church house. I mean, wreck it. I mean, they had to pack people out. They had to pack people out. But what Jerry is talking about now, Jerry said in the early years of 2000. And so Jerry came down one day to preach at the black church. And he started talking about inequities. He started talking about the black position, education. And we were looking, we just stunned. And the first thing that crossed people's minds was Jerry done turned white.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he was in his black skin, because of the mindset he had now, he was telling us that this day was coming in 2000. But then they said, well, no, Jerry, preach, hoop, sing us something. And Jerry was saying the minstrel show is over with.
Mm.
I'll sing and praise God, but that show is over with. I'm trying to tell you all something. That America is on its way to be doomed if we don't get this race thing right. He was saying that in 2000. And nobody wanted to hear that in their pulpits when they would invite him down, and they stopped inviting him. And that is the truth. Now everybody is in pulpit last Sunday talking about what's happening. Jerry was talking about that for almost 20 years. He wasn't talking about anything racial, but he was talking about having racism in the church because he's in both worlds now. And he said, if we don't get this straight, because the church has a responsibility to show love one to another. There's two places that America has to trust, and that is the government and the church. The government, they don't trust. And now they're getting to the point where they don't trust the church because the government has infiltrated itself politically into the church. So that's what happened in our world that sometimes white brethren don't know. We have our own issues, and it's always that argument that we have. And do we go on, or do we dial it back? And Jerry decides, I got to press forward. If I don't press forward, nobody's going to tell this message. And that's why I had him here, because the clock is ticking. We're not going to be here long. And I think God wants us to tell the truth, because the truth is the only thing that's going to make us free.
True.
So you remember those days, Jerry?
Absolutely, I do. You know, I used to have a difficult struggle trying to love white people. I was in the graduate program at Southern Methodist University and was in a spiritual formation group. And we had to kind of share with each other our emotional state, our spiritual state. And I remember sitting in that group, the only African American in that group, maybe one more African American in that group. They got around to me and I confessed, I said, I hate white people. And you could hear the screeching of the tires on that session. It's like everybody's feet in that session hit the brakes. But it was necessary for me to say that because it was a form of confession, and I could not continue the spiritual evolution that I needed to experience as a human being until I confronted the hatred that had tracked me from the dusty cotton patches of West Tennessee into East Texas and then into Dallas. I had to learn that love is not for the enemy. Love is for your own evolution. You cannot spell the word evolve without spelling the word love. And so when I love, the first beneficiary of that is my own soul. The greatest force in all of the universe is love. God is love. And so for me to arrest love in my life is to engage in my own arrested development. I cannot become fully human unless I embrace the powerful force of God's own description of himself, love. And so without that, I become destructive to my own community. If I allow hatred to exist in any part of my soul, it will end up destroying the people who are closest to me, even if my enemy is 1,000,000 miles away. And we see it happening all the time. We say that there are many homicides in South Chicago. I would say we need to reclassify those homicides as being covert forms of suicide. Because if a system of white supremacy would teach you to hate yourself and then to hate anything that moves around you, and especially to hate your own humanity, of course you're going to want to destroy anybody who reminds you of that humanity. So some people are not committing homicide. They are, in a sense, coaching others into committing homicide against them, but their desire is to commit suicide because hatred will make you hate your own existence. And you will do whatever you have to do to escape from it, even if you have to provoke another human being to pull the trigger that you are too much afraid to pull on yourself. And so this idea of love, we have to go back and study that, because it is not just designed, for the enemy. People say, I'm tired of hearing about love. You can't grow without love in your heart for yourself. And Black people got to learn how to love Black people before we can, truly say that we're engaging in love for white people. And that's one thing I had to learn as well, is that I had a lot of hatred for myself as a Black person, because that's what I was taught by my society and the environment in which I grew up in. But again, without love within my own spirit, I cannot experience spiritual evolution. I cannot experience spiritual growth without love. So it has to start there, within one's own soul. Embrace it, experience it, and then it flows out of us into whatever relationships that we're a part of. And it's not staged, it's not fake, it's not fabricated, it's not manufactured. It's just a natural outflow of the innate connection between the human life and the life of God that exists within us.
Okay. Doug, I want to pose a question to you, and then I want to tell you why I did it. When you and I were talking about my coach, and my coach is a white man. I went to college in Waco, and I went to a Black school, Black church, and lived in a Black neighborhood. So like you, I didn't interact with white brethren until I was in college. Because in college, people come from all over the world. And it was still that stigma that, we stayed to ourselves. So I was always the only Black guy in class. I took drafting. I was the only Black guy, in class, but I knew how to, just run silent and just, stay where I was. I was playing basketball. But when I was experiencing, have you ever experienced the integration of a neighborhood?
No, I've witnessed the integration of neighborhoods. The neighborhoods that I lived in North Alabama were strictly segregated. When I moved to college in Nashville, I went to Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. Lived in a neighborhood, well, when I was not in the dorm, first in the dorm, then I was in a neighborhood that was white. And I have not personally experienced that. The neighborhoods that we have lived in Abilene are predominantly white as well. Mm-hmm. And so the kind of tension and hatred that came out in the situations that I witnessed were pretty obvious, but that kind of experience has not been mine.
It was, and I asked that because, it's something that Jerry knows that even we have to address in our own community, our own race. Because you would see sometimes in movies, they would have black people that would live in, I don't know, the slums of the ghetto, and they were always talking about getting out of here. And where were they moving to? The place that was prejudice or lynched them. That was my place of peace now. I'm trying to get not get out the ghetto. I'm trying to get away from somewhat my people. And when people talk about, I'm trying to make it out of here. Make it out of where? Well, it was the injustice because we didn't have the resources to build our own neighborhoods and all that kind of stuff. But that was a term that we took on, that it was safer to live in the suburbs than the inner city because, in our own movies, we kind of glorified the crime. We came through the 70s, Superfly, Shaft and everything. We glorifying ghetto life. And then other people was trying to say, I'm going to move my children out of here. And they was heading straight to the place where they were killed. So it was like danger on both sides. And that's what I'll talk about, the argument in the middle. Because when we moved out, we couldn't come back. You get struck down because now you are tainted. And you can't come in and tell me nothing because you left. But there was a reason why I left and had to go here. And I took it on the head when I went in and integrated this place. They were doing everything to my children and stuff. So we almost in America didn't know where to go. That's why sometimes people will look at it being hopeless, because we didn't know where to go, because we were catching it on both sides. And it don't matter how talented you are. I was watching the show and they had, I hate to use names, but Wayne Brady. They gave him the living blues because either you're not black enough and you're not white enough here. They were giving him the living blues. So a lot of our people are caught up in that, just trying to live their lives. That's what racism does. You almost got a pocket of people that have nowhere to go because they catch it on both sides. They catch it when they go back home, and they catch it when they go where they live because they're not enough for either side. And that's one of the secrets of racism that they never really get to. They might say it in the movies, but they'll never hear two people sit down like you all and generally talk about that. So I know today that you learned something about Jerry. And I know Jerry learned something about you, because talk has to be deeper. Because I know you all have an agenda that y'all go out and do this here, but talk even has to be deeper. But you really got to trust somebody. You really got to trust somebody. It's like being married and then get a divorce. The woman still has your social security number. You really got to trust somebody. And that's what, Jesus talks about. If you find somebody that you can trust in, it's a blessing. So we're going to take a break and we'll come back, and I have some other things that I want you all to talk about. So we're going to take a break and we'll be back in 1 minute.
Ooh, ice cold. Freeze pop.
Are you looking to lose weight, detox your body, build your immune system, and boost your metabolism? Or do you lack energy throughout the day? Maybe you need more focus and mental clarity. Or maybe you're just looking to find ways to combat against health issues such as anxiety, headaches, muscle and nerve pain. Well, TLC is the place to be. And if none of those pertain to you, I'm here to tell you that everyone should be detoxing, no matter who you are. I'm Eudora Barnes, a personal distributor with Total Life Changes, and our products are just that, life-changing. Contact me today and let's discuss the various products containing hemp extract that are available in assisting with becoming a healthier you. The number is 469-783-4046. You can also email me your questions to eudorabarnes@yahoo.com or follow me on Instagram @heiressofgod, and that is HEIRESS_of_God. Talk to you soon.
In your life, and I know it's so many people that have um, that have gone through certain things and in certain degrees, and so you have different chronological eras of people who have suffered things. And I believe you woke somebody up that lived in 1816, their experience of racism will be different from somebody in 2005. And so we even need to hear each other when we talk about, racism. I didn't experience it the level that Jerry did, because I was in the cocoon of a black neighborhood. It wasn't black when I got there. That's why I say I remember the first time I was in the third grade when I heard that N word. That was third grade, and I was looking like, what did he say? And had I heard it before, because you didn't hear that too much. We didn't hear that too much on TV because it was censored. TV, you couldn't curse back then, but you could say that. You couldn't curse back then, but you could say that. So we didn't hear it that much. We were watching Leave It to Beaver and Batman. So it was only 3 channels on TV. So you didn't get around to hearing a lot of, things. And our neighborhood turned from white to African American in 2 years. When Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, it was white flight. 2 years. No, a year and a half. It was predominantly black. Because they thought it was going to be a, race-wide riot or something like that. But they kept us, they made us dismiss school. And we went home. We didn't know what for. They just said, everybody go home. So it's those kind of things that we, had to deal with it, and we didn't discuss it, even in church, not from the pulpit. So I know you all have a topic where you talk about white silence in the church. I know you all are dealing with that. And Doug, can you tell us a little bit about that? What you mean by white silence in the church?
Sure. I think that because of the socialization that white people in this country, including white Christians, white church leaders, have the socialization that they've received, especially, well, I don't know if I can say especially, but in these last decades, it's come across in a little bit different way. But the whole business of racism becomes problematic. Some people would say, I'm not a racist. White people would say, I'm not a racist. It's not my problem. I don't hate black people. I even have black friends. Those kinds of things that people would say. And when they get into the church, it's such a strange thing. This is not unique to any one Christian body, but a lot of Christian bodies, including the one that we're part of, would say, even during the civil rights movement, the church doesn't get involved in political matters.
Mhm.
We're a spiritual organization. We deal with the spiritual. But what they were doing is this artificial separation,
Right.
calling the kinds of things that have to do with the very heart of Christ and treating people with dignity and with equity. They're labeling it as a political issue rather than a deeply significant Christian moral issue. And I guess you could say even a doctrinal issue for that matter. But they would want to say that's not what the church does. And I think another piece of that, there are 2 or 3 pieces. I think that's one. A second piece is this whole business of what does it mean to be racist? Most white people, I'm going to use this term, okay? Please understand what it means.
Okay. No.
Good white people, okay? They're not the ones who were out, even during the civil rights era, they were not the ones who were going out and bombing people's houses or shooting people in their driveway. But they're the good white people, right? The church. They would say, I'm not racist, because when they would use the term racist, they would say racists are bad people. I'm not a bad person, therefore I can't be racist. The problem with that, again, is that racism is not a choice. It is a socialization. It is a way of operating. It's a way of constructing reality that we have all been socialized into. And again, we could go into great detail in talking about the history of that and how sociologically it works and all that. But the reality is it's there. The deeply embedded idea that white civilization and white people are superior to anybody else. And so that socialization, these good white Christians would say, doesn't really exist. And racism's a bad thing. I deplore racism, but I'm not a racist. I think the third piece is that there's this phenomenon that Robin DiAngelo, in that book I mentioned a few minutes ago, White Fragility, I'll just hold the front of it up if someone wants to take a look at that. It's a really, really powerful book, and it's written for white people. Okay, so I don't think that there'd be a whole lot of surprises in that book for black people, but she talks about white solidarity.
Mm-hmm.
So even white people who are not happy with, opposed to even some of the more overt, hateful, violent actions that are taken, who oppose that kind of thing, are not going to speak out, and they'll speak out against those kinds of things, but they're not going to speak out or to notice or to point out and condemn the daily microaggressions that black people and persons of color in this country have to endure. You, Kevin, you and Jerry both have alluded to some of those in your own life.
What would you call the difference between overt and unconscious racism?
Well, I guess you could say at some level there where people are actually they own up to it. You know, they are overtly talking hateful speech against black people, against persons of color. They're overtly outspoken against the kind of things that would be hurtful to and policies that would be detrimental to the black community. That's what I'm talking about, overt, where it's just it's clear. And they might even say, and I think in the last several years, for some time before that, I think in the general good white community, that kind of overt race hatred speech would have been frowned on and opposed, although it's coming back out, I think, now. But even those people who would oppose that overt racist hatred speech, they deny that there's anything wrong. I said this on the the video, the Facebook thing that you alluded to at the beginning of the show today, Kevin, when Jerry and I were together a couple of weeks ago. I have white Christian friends who say, well, I've got black friends. I have black friends. And they don't ever say anything about this. They don't ever say that there's a problem.
Right.
And they say, well, you know, why don't they say it? If it exists, they would say something. And I'm saying, no. They know that white people, and again, to use D'Angelo's terminology, white solidarity, but also white fragility, if they were to bring this up, they might ruin a cordial relationship that they have with a white person, and they just don't want to do that. Right. Or they don't want to continue to exhaust themselves in having to validate their own real personal experiences that are always kind of denied and pushed back or reinterpreted by their white friends. Mm-hmm. And so I'll tell this story. I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not, but several years ago, I was teaching a church history class. I used to teach church history and teach church history at Abilene Christian. And we were dealing with the issues of the civil rights movement in the churches. And I was having small groups of the students to come over to my house to eat lunch together and to watch that first episode of the Eyes on the Prize film, 1987, the first one. And so it just so happened that this day, this lunch, there were about 6 or 8 young men. They were all young men that day. All but one were white. There was one black man, and they were all good friends. They were seniors. They were all good friends, and we sat and watched that film, and then we, after it was over, were debriefing about it, talking about it. And all the young white men were saying, well, we're just so glad that that's all gone. You know, all that overt racism, all that racist stuff is gone. And they were, you know, quick to be very condemnatory of any of that kind of, again, what I'm calling overt racist stuff. Mm-hmm. And they were so glad that all that was gone now. And finally, the young black man who was their friend, who had been with them for 4 years nearly in school, he just spoke out and said, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I can't walk in a store in this town without being followed. If I go into a restaurant by myself or with black friends, we are usually ignored for a long time, unless I'm with white friends and can get seated early. And he began to say one thing after the other, and the white young men were just sitting there saying they were stunned because it had never come up. Right. And made it seem to the whites that there was no problem. And I don't fault that young black man for not saying anything, because if he had, it probably would have ruined the relationship that he enjoyed, a cordial relationship with these friends, and it would have put him in a position of having to defend his own lived experience to people who have no idea of what he had to deal with. And so I'm not sure, Kevin, if all of that is pertinent to your
right, you know, it is, because like I say, sometimes, you know, there are hidden stories are the best lessons, because those kind of stories would go to your grave. Nobody would really know that, just isolated. And we always wait for something to become public and then become a tragedy. And then everybody wants to start spilling beans and then start talking. But if you have gradual conversations like that, because you can tell they're in his company and this is happening in their company and they don't even know. And that's what I mean, sometimes like unconscious. I walked into my job one day and I hadn't been there in a while. My administrator saw me. And he walked up to me and there was some people standing, some, you know, black people standing on to the side. He said, boy, I'm glad to see you. And they said, boy. And he said, what? Oh, I ain't mean nothing by it. You know, and I just said, hey man, what's going on? You know. But that's what that's what I mean. Because we were called boys so long. Yes. And we knew what that means historically. He was just saying it and enjoy. Boy, I'm glad to see you, but you can't say that now. Because y'all said it so long and it meant this. Mm-hmm. Don't even start that back up. So people on edge. Now, his friendship with those guys are on edge. They probably haven't mistreated him or nothing like that. There, everything is okay. But him going around, it would be like Jerry coming to when we were living in Houston, and he brought several of his white associates with him and walked in the building. They wouldn't say anything. They would look at him. See, he gets it on both ends. They say, hey, Jerry, they still come up and hug him and everything, but after a while they say, what's that about? And they're not gonna say anything to his white friends or anything, but they're just gonna look. Because of that kind of mistrust that came about, and that's what Jerry had been saying. He had been saying all along while, preaching. Our thing, and Jerry and I talked about this. Our thing is this. This is the way we're talking a little bit about justice. Okay, I'll let Jerry talk about justice. But in the Black community, I'm gonna tell you what justice looks like. Justice looks like I go out and judge things black and white. When something happens over here, man, if that was a black person, I'll go over here. Something happened, man, if that was a black person. Well, if that was President Obama, well, if that was a black person. That's the way black people judge things in America. They judge it black and white. If something happens, that's the first thing that crosses our mind, if that was a white person, because that's all we've seen in the justice system. And that's the way we walk, our daily walk. And I'll let Jerry comment on that.
Yeah, I think until people can understand that the word just simply means right. What is right? And you can't do what is right until you are rightly related to the God who made you. God teaches you what is right and what is wrong. And even children at a very early age, they know when you're showing favoritism, or if you're doing for one and not doing for the other. It's something that God has innately put in us as the law of our very existence. Jesus came as the Son of God, to teach us about the kingdom that is within you. He had to wake us up to that fact, that God's righteousness is about what is right. And you can't do righteousness unless you are rightly related to your Creator. And I think that's how people practice unrighteousness towards each other, is because they recognize the Creator of life. How can I have reverence for your life if I don't reverence the one who made your life? And if I'm not rightly related to the Creator of life, I'm not going to know how to be rightly related to you. I'll see you as commodity, as material substance that I can exploit, for my own pleasure, my own use. You will be nothing more to me than a thing to be used if I'm disconnected and divorced from the life of the Creator who brought all of us into existence. And so justice is just, the other word for justice is righteousness. And righteousness is something that flows out of a right relationship with our Creator. That's why the first commandment is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second one is likened unto it. You get the first one right, then you're going to be rightly related to the second one, the neighbor. And sometimes we get the cart before the horse. We're trying to get rightly related to the neighbor without having any right relationship with the Creator. I can't be reconciled to you as a human being if I have not been first reconciled to the life of God. It is that first step of being rightly connected to God that equips me then with the capacity to be rightly connected to you. And so the word that comes forth from the mouth of God then becomes a commodity that we can trade back and forth as commerce, spiritual commerce, that the spiritual nature of God that exists in me can be put into capsules that we call words. And I can speak words of life into you that came not from me, but from the one who lives in me, who is that life. But if we don't trust one another, we cannot have a truce long enough to stop shooting at each other, to where we can experience a fair and balanced trade of my inner nature being exported into your inner nature through the trafficking of words that give life and the receiving of words that give life. And we've been cut off too long from each other that we can't even have that experience. You know, when I cut myself off from you, I'm cutting myself off from God, because I'm not me and you're not you, individually separated. We are one together in the very nature of God. So if I kill you, I'm killing God.
Right.
So I think when we talk about justice, what is fair, what is right, if I don't feed you, I don't feed God. If I don't put clothing on your back, I don't put clothing on God's back. And I think that's where we got to work to in this country, to realize that we're dealing with something sacred, something that is not of this world, something that is spiritual, something that is eternal, but we can't even see it because our eyes get locked on the carrier or the cartridge or the container. And I think that when I see in you the same presence that is existing in me that I've come to appreciate and to love, I can't help but to do right by you.
Right. You know, I was watching the news. I think it was on yesterday. And you know, me and my wife, we have a nonprofit, so we deal with a lot of kids in low-income areas. And she does a ladies program called Reflection of Our Petals, and where she try to reunite young women to their mothers, which should be their role models. And sometimes on the outside, you know, just kind of holding a mirror up. So if I ask Doug why, then I want to answer his question why. Okay. Sometimes the black woman is left out of this. Now, the picture of the black woman, when I say that sometimes, a lot of times, you know, white is in our struggle. Picture the master at the house, and Toby and Lizzie is in the hut, the slave hut. They had a hard day at work.
Yeah.
And the master yells down and says, "Toby, send Lizzie up here. She's on her way to be raped." But she has to go to the mirror and put lipstick on and put a dress on and bathe herself to go and get raped. So when she does that, when she leaves the house, imagine her looking at her husband, her protector, her confidant, and watch her walk out the door to go and get raped and do God knows what up there, and then come back. And he tries to console her, and she's doing this. Only a few days later to lay with him and then go to work in the fields. And then repeat that again. That drove a wedge in between that black relationships. And after a while, black women start figuring out, you can't protect me. And his thing is, what can I do? You know, because if I stands up, you know, master kills me. So just be patient and just get raped continually. So that trickled into our relationship. And now what you see now is women sort of on their own. So a lot of times when you say, well, for all the black family, when they hit America, they broke up the family. Children got sold here, woman went that way, and that was it. So a lot of times those things are still, those residual, problems are still entering the black relationships of mistrust. You can't take care of me, and I got to do it on my own. I don't care if I got to strap my kids to my back and work 2 jobs. And the insult to them, just speaking for the background, the insult to them is that I went through all of that in slavery only for you to become a success and marry a white woman. That becomes, because race started that. And that's a never-ending problem in the black community. And we can't get out of it. Like you were talking about in the white community, man, we grew up in it, and what can we? That became a problem with us. And for her to wait around for us to try to do something and make it, and we're using the, not saying the white man excuse, but the white man problem and bringing it back in. She just said, I'll do it myself. And that becomes the problem. So all that we grow up in, like you and Jerry and I, all that we grew up in when it was race, just multiplied our problems. So that's why I tend to, the question to you all in our last 30 minutes, and Jerry, you go first, and then Doug, you go first, and Jerry. What do you think America is?
Where do I think America is? America is in a place where a massive debt, if you want to use that term, a massive cost has been run up, and it has never been repaid. The kinds of things, Kevin, that you were describing, the psychological damage that was done to the black psyche, the black spirit during the times of slavery, and then when slavery as an institution, as a legal institution, is done away with, that didn't pay the debt. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of what Ta-Nehisi Coates said in he read an article on reparations, the case for reparations, and I know that's really sometimes even in the black community very controversial subject, but he said it's like this. It's like somebody has run up this huge credit card debt, and then they said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to stop using that credit card. And then they're surprised when the debt that they ran up originally still has to be paid. Mm-hmm. As if just stopping from charging anymore is going to take everything away. The debt's never been paid. I'm not talking simply about a monetary payment. I'm talking about massive repair. If you want to use the term reparations, it just simply means repair.
Right.
And I think that America is in the place where they are going to have to deal, white America is going to have to deal with the debt that it owes. He also talks about the fact that, you can't just, this stuff doesn't just go away, right? It doesn't just become better. An alcoholic may have to suffer from the effects of this for the rest of his life, but if he becomes a recovering alcoholic, if he acknowledges the evil, the problem, the addiction, at least is on the right path, but it may still have to suffer some of the effects of that. And I don't doubt that that's going to be the case in America. But I think that there's a massive spiritual, psychological, economic, social debt that has, number one, probably not even been fully acknowledged, maybe not acknowledged at all at the level that it has to be. And it has certainly not been paid. And I really feel that the only way that that's going to be remedied, well, I should say it this way. There has to be a spiritual grounding,
Right.
with people to understand what the gospel is all about in the first place, before there can be the courage and the fortitude to begin to acknowledge, to understand, and to begin the payback that's going to have to happen. And I feel like some kind of, I don't know, I'm a church historian, I'm an educator, and I think that people really have to know the facts. I think we have to tell the truth about this before people will even acknowledge the realities that you were referring to, that you were just describing. But the knowledge alone is not going to do it. There has to be a spiritual transformation. There has to be a spiritual conviction, and there has to be a courage and commitment that this will be acknowledged and repaid. I don't think that there's ever going to be racial reconciliation until those pieces are all there. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa and some other places, that's really important, to tell the truth. That's absolutely essential. But sometimes just telling the truth merely re-traumatizes those who have been the people who suffered under it originally. Unless there is repair, unless there is repayment of the debt, however that is, whatever shape that takes, I don't think we're ever going to get to racial reconciliation.
Mm-hmm. Good, Jared?
And the question again is,
Where do you think America is?
I think
in this real time.
I think America is lost. I think America is lost. And she's lost because every prophet that God sent her way, she killed.
Mm.
And she has been very intentional about not allowing there to ever be the production of any more prophets to come this way. And so you stone and kill the messenger. You're killing the voice of God that the whole country is crying out for now. When God was speaking through Prophet Martin and so many others who came this way, we shut our ears. We hated them. Martin Luther King's disapproval rating the day that he was killed was 75%. And you have the audacity, not you, Kevin, but others in the country asking, where are the Martin Luther Kings? You don't appreciate your prophets. You don't listen to your prophets. You are all about making profits. Profits. And so your thing of money, your idol God that you created in your own image, your monetary system, now it has mastery over you, America. And the very thing that you put all of your hope, all of your affection in cannot save you now. And America is staggering in the darkness and begging now for the prophets. And I don't know if God will have mercy on this country again, to allow there to be other prophets to emerge in this hour, because too much is ego driven. And even the death of this black man is serving as a platform for some to grandstand, instead of seeing it as an opportunity to come face to face with the truth about themselves and the truth about this country. And so that's what I would say. It just seems like in this country, it takes the visual of a black man either being shot in his back as he's walking from his car in his driveway into his home to greet his family in the evening, in the person of 37-year-old Medgar Evers, or the gunning down, putting a bullet in the neck of one of the greatest orators and prophets of the 20th century, and now to see the last breath being kneed out of the neck of a black man dying on camera. Does it take death in order for us to appreciate life? Why does somebody have to keep dying in order to get the attention of America? But I'll say, if we don't get it, if it takes prophets dying, then that will be the eventual outcome of the American experiment, will be death. And so my prayer, my hope, and my heart's desire is that God has not given up on America, upon this country, because all of us are in it, and to some degree, we've all been complicit in some shape, form, or fashion. And so I know that is a hard saying, but I have to say it because we keep killing people that keep trying to tell us the truth. Right. And the way out of this is that we're going to have to hear the hard truth about where we have come to as a country. And I hope there's enough soul left in America to where it has not been totally wiped out by political profiteers and prosperity propagators. I hope there's enough spirit, enough humanity, as Doug was talking about. I hope there's enough of that left in this nation for us to repent and to hopefully learn the lesson that God has been trying to beat in our heads for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, we're gonna take a break. You know, that there for both of you all, that was phenomenal. We'll take a break and we'll be back in a minute.
Hang on to the world as it spins around. Just don't let the spin get you down. Things are moving fast. Hold on tight and you will last. Keep your self-respect, your manly pride. Get yourself in gear, keep your stride. Never mind your fears. Brighter days will soon be here. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Yeah.
Hey, we're back. This is My Better Half, and our guest today, Dr. Jerry Taylor and Brother George Foster of Abilene Christian College. And I hope, I hope you all appreciate this show. Uh, I didn't put on a shouting match. I believe in solutions, and you get them from both perspectives. You get the behind the door honest truth that we don't get a lot of times. We let the media tell us, or stories and movies tell us what's actually happening. But when you hear somebody's unadulterated story, then you can sit down and now you can begin to dialogue. But you got to have honest truth, and that's what happened. Whenever there, that's why I wish people would read the Bible. Whenever there was a conflict somewhere and people were brought together, they made a covenant. They dug a well or call a place lest they forget. And they would make a covenant. And if people would begin to make covenants with each other, even though there was offenses, you can go forward, not forgetting, but in hope. And so, what I try to do is I try to even through this stuff, you try to live as an example, because even through this, what is your initial goal? My initial goal is to gain my brother. That's really my initial goal, is to gain my brother. Hopefully, like Jerry said, America don't fall apart. But I think that initially, when we put in God we trust, one nation under God, that we were talking about our submission to him. We put it on all of our gods. But now we replaced that. And so I think it's our duty, Doug, I think it's our duty to set an example, because what we see on TV is people contentious, arguing, but you see clips of this boy hugging the policeman and crying, both of them. So sometimes, it takes that to bring people together, but then you see people crying out that I only wanted you to care about me. That's what I want. I wanted you to care about me. I need you to police me. I need you to keep the peace. I needed you to care about me. And that's what this staying thing is. So when that happens, they're going to be an embrace. Hopefully both of them wearing a mask, but there's an embrace. And now people are locked in arms, marching for a call of justice, just to do right, for sometimes the wrong, that happens. So you see parts of that, and those are the parts that we're going to have to, that we're going to have to magnify. Because if we don't, then we're going to let, instead of carrying anger, we're going to let anger carry us. And when anger carries us, it's going to carry us to a place we don't want to go. So Jerry, what is your you and Doug's? I'll get Doug second. What is you all's goal? Because I know a lot of times y'all meet opposition, especially in the beginning. But what is you all's goal?
I would say that the goal is to give God free expression in and through our flesh and our blood and our bones. I really think that it all begins with the Creator, because we're only here temporarily. This place that we live is not our permanent dwelling place. And I think the goal that every human life should have is to grow up into the life of the Creator that gave it permission to come here in the first place. That we have to all remember that we're here as a result of an executive decision made by the divine executor, and that's God. And unless we turn to Him wholeheartedly, we look to a lot of sources for our solutions, but racism is a spiritual problem and it will require a spiritual solution. And so our goal is to remind people, no matter how strong our intellect, no matter how great our educational pedigree may be, divine wisdom that can be applied to our social problems will come from that one who is ultimately the divine spirit, the life of God that brought life into existence. And as 2 Chronicles 7:14 says that, if my people are called by my name will humble themselves, and we're in a humbling phase right now. We saw conflict and chaos and genocide happening in other nations around the world, and we, the great America, felt that it would never touch us, but it's here now. And so what is the goal? To remind people that the only way that peace can be experienced, genuine, authentic peace, is to turn to the one who is the Prince of Peace. That's the goal. I think that's the goal, and that's the kind of friendship I think God has blessed me to have with Doug. That we can work together and have worked together all the 17 years I've been here at ACU and having these difficult conversations, but we recognize the life of God in each other, and that has to be the goal. I cannot say that I am fully formed if I can only see God in myself and cannot see God in the other. Right. It is only when I'm able to see God in the life of my brother or my sister that I know that I'm on the right path of spiritual growth and spiritual development, because that is the goal, returning back to our Creator. But we got to connect with Him here in this life to know Him, so that when we get out of this world and the world to come, He will know us.
He will know us. Right.
Can't expect to know Him now if you don't get to know Him here, and to know Him in your brother, to know Him in your sister.
That's right.
Okay, Doug, give us a word.
Jerry has expressed it so eloquently, and I just have to say that it's exactly my sentiment. I think what we're trying to do, what our goal is for God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. To use Dr. King's terminology, to bring about the beloved community on earth as it is in heaven. And I think that, I pray that, I hope that what we are seeing now is a tipping point in the history of this nation, of this world, of this nation, and that Christians who have that deep sense of the absolute necessity of making the kingdom of God visible on earth as the will of God is done in heaven, have got to take advantage of this tipping point. And I know I'm getting emails every day from businesses, everything from financial organizations to florists to travel magazines to everything else you can think of. And they're all making statements now. In some cases, I think it's probably bandwagon effect. They don't want to look bad, and so they'll get on and say something about, we've always been committed to this, but that's not helpful. But there are others that are saying, and things that are changing, that are saying we're not going to let things continue as they have been in the past. I mean, even from something as what some people might see as insignificant as an online travel magazine that I get. It's called Afar, AFAR, just a travel magazine. It talks about places you can go to. I won't ever go to most of them, but look at the pictures at least. They said, we realize that we have not been as diverse in the way we have covered these stories and the way we have our staff. And they made several specific commitments that they were going to change things. I mean, this is not even a specific Christian commitment, but what I'm trying to say is that as Christians who are committed to this, we've, I think, got an opportunity to take advantage of this tipping point to bring people, and especially white Christians who have not acknowledged the reality of white supremacist racism that is embedded in this society from top to bottom, to help them understand that not as an attack on them, but as a transformative moment that God has given us, basically, to understand something that we've either resisted or that we have refused to acknowledge, or we kind of acknowledged it but just didn't think it was that big a deal. And that can't happen anymore. I mean, Jerry and I were together in a program Sunday night, and I said, 50 years ago, there were a lot of folks who thought that was a tipping point too. That things were better, that things were going to change, that things were taken care of, and it wasn't true. Because as Martin Luther King said in his The Other America speech, too many white Christians were more interested in tranquility, security for themselves, than they were in doing the work of righteousness,
right,
and justice. And that could happen again. But I really feel like we've got an opportunity as Christians to take advantage of this and to really capitalize and to really push people to say, what is it that God really is all about as far as his will being done on earth as it is in heaven.
Right. I think that what Jerry was saying a few minutes ago is that preceding that scripture where it says, if my people call by my name, he says, if I send pestilence, if I send war, or I send a famine. We ain't had a famine yet. So America don't need to, lift up its pride, because every great nation that thought they were great failed by something just insignificant. And then they were no more. So I hope we don't, we don't think that because America never was great. America was blessed. God is great. But now they've switched that around. America's great, so we'll bless God. No, America's not great. America was blessed. God is great. And when you remove God, like you said, then our nation is on its own and will consume itself. For everybody else to have a seat in the bleachers and watch this great nation consume itself.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Okay, man. Outstanding show. And Doug, again, I really want to thank you, because sometimes it's hard to get, that kind of truthful dialogue, really on the show. Because sometimes people say, well, both of you all got to go back to your neighborhoods. If you didn't represent, then you have a problem. So it takes courage to stand and tell the truth. And that's what we have to do. I'm glad I'm not doing this for money. I don't have no sponsors. So I can say exactly what I need to say, in truth. And I hope that people will watch this and gain some empathy and some knowledge and gain some spiritual awareness of where this country is. This is a country that God had his hand on. And even through all its faults, But if we turn our backs on the one who gave us what we have, I think that we are going to see something that we don't want to see, because it has not got into our food and it has not got into our children. So we're still on the mercy side, because God can blink an eye and give us exactly what we don't want to see. So I want to thank you all, man. It was a great show, outstanding. I was looking forward to this, for the past week, and I was kind of leery on which way I was going to approach it, but I asked God to guide me through it, and I knew you all would do it justice. So I just want to thank you all, man, and I'm just thankful for Jerry for all the years that I've known him. He's been an inspiration to me, and Doug, I'm thankful to you, and I hope we become good friends too. So this is my better half, signing off. Steve was over to the side. So we're going to try to bring you some shows that's going to be inspirational and really help our community and help our spiritual life also. So thank you to my producers. They do a great job. And if you're looking for a show, you need to call my producers. They'll probably send up a link on Facebook, but they are outstanding, and they do a great job. So without anything else, we're going to sign off. This is my better half. Listen to the video, share it, be safe.
Hang on to the world as it spins around. Just don't let the spin get you down.